Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for the first Mental Health Monday. And thank you, Phil, for taking the time out of your day to do this. I think it's going to be an awesome resource for some folks who are stuck at home, whether that's by choice or forced. So, do you want to give us a quick overview of kind of like who you are at Emergence and maybe just a little bit of your professional qualifications before we start giving people mental health advice?
Yeah, sure. So I am the pastor of all things care related, pastor of care and counseling. We've come up with different names for that. We figured pastor over care systems didn't work out so well because you can't pastor a system, but pastor of care and counseling. And my credentials, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist who has before coming on to Emergence, had a private practice. And but also was very involved in ministry and has a undergraduate degree in pastoral ministry and cross cultural studies with a focus on world religions. So those are, I guess, the credentials.
Yeah, I think
Although,
so. You left out keeping everyone on the Emergent staff totally sane and in great relationships with each other and their spouses and with themselves. So I think you could add that to the list too.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So thanks for what you do. This should be natural rhythm for us. You and I end up in conversations, I think, about mental health and stuff like that. I think it kind of gets us
yep,
both excited. So,
yeah, no,
um,
no.
so I guess just to lay things out, we've got, an entire state that's now kind of under a curfew, and we're all trying to avoid
Yeah,
each other.
crazy
And
times.
even when we're with each other, we're supposed to be 6 feet apart. What is
Yeah,
your as a professional healthcare worker? I'm going to call you mental healthcare worker.
yeah.
What are the things that kind of just concern you right away, like when you hear that and you kind of consider our situation that we're in?
That concern me. I don't. I think I I think in general, like I said, it's a really weird time. I
Yeah.
think unprecedented, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
like, uh, you know, we're all kind of just, I think, adjusting to life remotely. Where we're all like quarantined. Um, so if you're asking me what concerns me, about it, I think, and again, part of me is just still trying to understand it,
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of what's happening. I
I
think,
mean, maybe Phil, maybe concerned is like is the wrong. I'm just looking at it from a standpoint of we're broadcasting this out to Emergence
yeah,
Church
yeah,
folks
no,
and people who maybe have just found us online because we're putting out this content. So
yeah,
this is a very kind of distinct people group who are used to gathering not only together in a huge group on Sundays, but
yeah,
also a lot of folks are in a regular rhythm where they have community groups where they're hanging out with friends. Where their main goal, like kind of Monday through Saturday when they're not in church Sunday mornings, is to
yeah.
be reaching out to the least and the lost and kind of connecting with people. And all of a sudden, that feels like it's kind of been taken away from us.
Hmm.
So what do you like? I guess when thinking about processing that, what do you kind of immediately go to in terms of starting to care for people who might be feeling the effects of that?
Yeah. Well, again, I think I think that's why I'm starting with the reality of just being honest about the adjustment and understanding. I think that's what we're all doing. I think I think everybody's just trying to make sense of what's surreal right now. And I think that just looks different for everybody depending upon what season of life you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of people that I know right now are being forced into homeschooling, is discombobulating. Or you go to the flip side of that, and the teachers who now have to at home do digital teaching when their 3-year-old in the background is like
Yeah, yeah.
and
It
then
can't
trying
be
to
easy for any of them for sure.
so I think versus I think some of this stuff, it's really interesting because it's both something to have concerns about, but then something to see the opportunity in. Because I think a lot of people, who we're in a culture that finds a lot of identity in what we do. That's why when we're hanging out together, the first thing we ask each other is, hey, what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
What do you do
uh,
for a living? What are your hobbies, right?
Right. Which is the most agonizing question in the world for somebody who's like in between high school and college and doesn't know if they're going to take a gap year. The most torturous question
Yeah,
ever.
my
Uh,
daughter can attest to that. Every time she gets asked where she's going to school, she's like,
right.
I wish you would ask me like what my favorite color is or
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
book I'm reading right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, um, we find a lot of identity in what we do. And I think also, work can oftentimes serve, it keeps us busy. And so when we're not busy, and this quarantine is forcing a lot of people to change their rhythms and not get involved in the things that kind of keeps them preoccupied. And I think one of the things as a Christian and as as a human being, I think in general, to pay attention to is um, we're people that oftentimes distract ourselves,
Yeah.
from what's going on inside of us. And so I think, and how we respond to feelings inside of ourselves that are uncomfortable, are numerous. They from healthy to dysfunctional to just straight up distracting. So I think one of the both the problems and opportunities that this season creates for us is that we have to sit in a room alone. We have to be alone more, and the noise cancellation that is often going on. That causes us to be able to distract ourselves from feelings that we might not know what to do with, or not want to deal with, are less, and so I think that's one of my concerns and hopes, during this time is that, people are forced into a situation where their normal ways of distracting themselves with normal functions in life, like work,
Hmm.
are changed or less. And so I think the big question is kind of like, how will we use that? How will we use that time both to, you could say, connect with our family in this opportunity, and also connect with the Imago Dei, who God's made us to be, and accept that, um, because that's what we're going to be faced with. It's a lot more of ourself and our family.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It brings up an interesting point that I saw. Um, I got an email blast from a filmmaker friend in LA, and he often writes about his creativity and his Christianity kind of combining. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that he wrote was like, how are you going to take this time to not just distract? And for him, kind of reaching out to other creative filmmakers who often their complaint is I don't have enough time to do my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
His challenge was, okay, well, if that's really been your excuse, how can you use this for the positive? And for me, when I looked at it as a Christian who I think if I didn't ever have work and I didn't ever have, a bunch of things on my to-do list, I would sit there and say like, yes, I would love to sit down and read the Bible more. I would love to learn how to pray in a way that really connects with the Spirit, and with the Lord. And I think a lot of times, I'm not alone in this in saying a lot of times it's like, oh, if I just had more time to do that. So that's why I kind of like looked at that email from him and thought, if I didn't apply this to my art, but I applied it to my faith, what would that look like for me, in the quiet times? But you brought up an interesting point, which I think you're kind of digging into now about how a lot of times, scripture and prayer and those things, when we get closer to God, it's like that mirror, that kind of reveals a lot of the things we don't necessarily love about ourselves.
Yeah.
Or maybe that like reveals reasons why we're distracting. Do you feel like, since people are going to be confronted with that, um, do you have any practical kind of takeaways for people as we start to get used to this weird rhythm? That's like a funny thing to say, right? But
Yeah.
as we're coming into like week 2 and beyond that, we're going to get used to this, and I think that discomfort will probably creep up a little bit more. You'll have more opportunity to push into not just ignoring the things that make you feel uncomfortable. So, do you have any tips or any like really kind of down to earth ways that you can just kind of dig into that discomfort,
Yeah.
kind of start
Yeah.
to unpack in a safe way, like some of those small things that we kind of run away from, and how to incorporate our faith into that,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, So one of my favorite quotes actually is I think it's Blaise Pascal. He says, "Man's greatest miseries derive from not being able to sit in a room alone." Right. And I don't know that I agree completely. I don't think our greatest miseries,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
come from that. And again, like there's a lot of things to be concerned with circumstantially. Uh, with what's going on with this whole COVID-19 thing,
Hmm.
whether it's health of your family and loved ones, whether it's the stock market, your finances, what's going to happen to your job, um, how you're going to homeschool your kids, all sorts of things, that I think are there. But at the end of, uh, so I think with that, of course, there's a practical what do I do with what I'm powerless over, what I
Hmm.
don't have control over, and and yet yeah, I think the thing I'm digging into and focusing on is sure, um, just like that quote says, why is it so difficult to sit alone with myself? Why are we so prone to getting bored so quickly, or to getting or distracting ourselves so quickly with a number of different things? I mean, it's weird to think that a lot of people, we don't think of ourselves as addicted, but the things that we run to distract ourselves from what's happening inside, I think we're the most practical thing that I think I'm pointing at here is to notice the ways that we move away from what's happening internally, and also I could apply the same thing to engaging with our families, with our spouses, with our kids, in a way that we're fully present for what's going on with them. I think anything from, like I said, getting busy with work could distract us from this, to social media, our media devices, to just the ways that we busy ourselves. I mean, and sure, as bad as alcohol and or pornography, or over, there's a million ways, right? Like that we
Sure.
can do. And I think practically, I think this making time, to actually pay attention to what's happening inside ourselves. We have to remember that God made, this is a fallen world. We know that we're not perfect people, but that God made our emotions too. They're a part of what's going on inside of us. They're part of His design, and they're not perfect. They're broken like every other part of our functioning, to some degree, and but that they're messengers. They're trying to tell us something,
Yeah.
and so the things that we're avoiding are it's like similar, like knowing you need to go to the doctor. You haven't been to the dentist for God knows how long, and the nagging feeling of, I know something's going on in there. I should probably get it checked out, and it's minor right now, and you don't want it to get it more severe, more severe, more severe, to where it's like, okay, now you have to go to the dentist because it's horribly painful, So I think the practical thing is to make peace with with your emotions, to make peace with what's going on with you, to spend some time inviting those things to dinner, to sit down and say, okay, what is my body saying to me right now? What's being communicated? And yeah, using scripture, prayer as a mirror. There's a combination of the both. I know I don't want to sit here and just talk about navel gazing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
saying, let's just have a whole podcast about looking into
No,
yourself.
but
Like,
I do think it's really, outside of the fact that we're living in like a pandemic world. I think that this is one of the most relevant things in our culture um, before this happened. You know what I mean? Like the idea of distracting ourselves, the idea of always filling our time, the idea of getting our identity from the things we do and not like who we are, who we were created by. So I do. I would never want this to be happening, but I do think that there's a lot of people who are going to see amazing gains in their growth in this stuff just because we're forced to.
yeah, 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 and so I think, practically, again, actually spending some time, so one of the things I often think about is, when it comes to our emotions, is that emotions, again, they communicate a lot. They tell us a lot about ourselves, and so, um, um, as much as so anywhere from communicating about an impetus towards action, like when emotion communicates in and of itself. So 70% of communication is nonverbal, right? 30% 30% is what you say, the content. 70% is, inflection, tone, tone of voice, rate of speech. People
Sure.
say, I wear my heart on my sleeve. What does that,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Except to say, like, I'm sad and I don't want you to know I'm sad, but you're going to know anyway,
How much
you
of
know?
that? How much of that 70% do you feel like people are aware that they're projecting? Um,
No,
yeah,
a lot of times I don't think that we
like
really,
none at all, right?
yeah, yeah.
I know I
You know,
don't. I'm very unaware when it comes to you've had a lot of conversations with me. I'm sure I'm arms flailing and sweating and whatever.
yeah.
But
But I think, but that practical tool of actually just sitting down and knowing that even those things, just try to, there's not much more practical than just try to notice emotions that come up that you don't like very much, or that you keep on the outskirts and that you
hmm
kind of just scurry from, and run to other things, whether it's Netflix, your job, getting busy with some home improvement project, you know, or again, even healthy things, but what are those things that I don't like that come up in me that it's a form of self-rejection, which actually is what we'll call shame.
yeah,
Any form of self-rejection where you are, I don't like that part of myself. I'm just not going to pay attention to it. And yet we don't get to order our emotions or what we're feeling on a menu in the morning as if like I get a choice in that. Life happens, things come up in us, and we can either suppress it, deny it, or acknowledge it for what it is. And then we get a choice in what we do with it, after that. So I think again, this focus is just around the fact that this quarantine is gonna give us a lot more potential time with ourselves, and I'm focusing on that right now, on that
hmm
time with ourselves, because the reality is God knows us. We're fully known and fully loved, and it's in coming to Him that even those things that come up in us that are sinful, or that tempt us, He knows it. In fact, He wants us to come to dine with Him, or to meet with Him, bringing that what He already knows fully, to Him, so that He can, work with us to in that metamorphosis process, that transformation process, where we become more like Him and see more of that redemption,
hmm
happening, in our lives. But if we can't look at it ourselves, how can we really bring it to Him and bring it into the light? You know. So
yeah,
I think this time can really give us an opportunity, where we're forced into a bit more isolation, to get to know that person more, and even recognize where do I not even want to look at myself? What do I get so rushed to kind of get out of alone time for? What's so uncomfortable about that? Why when it gets silent, in a conversation, do I need like real quick to fill the noise because I don't like this, silence,
yeah,
you
for
know?
sure.
But I also think, as much as that it's a time for being for recognizing that in ourselves right now, and getting a little bit more comfortable in that time alone, I think equally important right now, we were made for relationship, and there's this I was looking at it before in First John, I think it's chapter 2, uh, where or no, Second John. There's only one chapter, so chapter 1, where he says towards the end, "I have much to write to you, but I do not want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face, so that our joy may be complete."
Hmm.
You know, uh,
That could be a
you
lot
know,
of ways we start letters right now.
what's that?
I said that could be a lot of ways we could start letters right now.
Right. I wish to be face to face with you, to like have physical contact, and I think there's just something about, we see, in the Bible, do not neglect the gathering. And right now we're out of a biblical rhythm, of getting to be face to face, of getting to be with each other, and yet, there's that kind of catch-22, because we're in a digital age, where
hmm
we've got access to the kind of technology where we can do a lot about that, but it doesn't negate the fact that being with each other, face to face, there's something about that, about community, about body life, that
Yeah.
we were made for. Even the Trinity, who God is, and the fact that we're made in His image, the Imago Dei, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, one, this reality that we were made for community and relationship. And so right now, I think it's really important, especially for those people who are prone to isolate to begin with, but that their job or their rhythms of life force them to like
Right.
have
Yeah.
engagement with
Yeah.
people, like despite what they might want to do. If it were up to them, or like they have to, and so it keeps them engaged. I think we've got to be creative right now, in terms of forming rhythms of relationship with other people and new habits, because we're not going to school, and seeing the friend next to us, and we're not going to work, and we're going, or even getting the babysitter to come over or whatever. None of those human interaction kind of moments that
Right.
we're kind of forced to have are happening. And so, how are
Or
we?
even when they do happen, it's like you would shake someone's hand, and now it's like a pretend high five or an elbow
Yeah,
bump or something. Like,
yeah,
can
right.
I
But
can I
yeah,
have one of those packs of toilet paper too? Or it's like,
yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, I even noticed when I went to ShopRite the other day, and I was like shopping with my head down, because I didn't want anybody to try to talk to me, I didn't want to have that airspace.
Yeah.
Uh,
So next week we're actually going to talk about the other half of people who like alls they want is alone time, and now
yeah,
they've got like 8 people in their house. So it's funny, like when I heard you say that about like putting your head down, and some of my favorite people in the world are like that even when there's not a pandemic. So I do know that now that they have like 8 people in their house all the time, they're struggling too. So we can look
yeah,
forward to that next week.
yeah.
I'm gonna as I look at the clock and I think about wrapping up, I'm gonna throw something at you that we didn't talk about ahead of time, but give me and I'll do this afterwards too. I'll do one, but I want you to give me one thing that you're doing for yourself, just small. It could be small, it could be big. Just one way that you're kind of caring for yourself. One way that you're trying to draw nearer to the Lord, and one way that you're trying to help other people in the midst of all this. Can you give me 3 quick takeaways?
Mm, yeah. Um, I think one way that I'll do I'll reverse them for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you could do them in any order. No rules here.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm trying to when it comes to um, as like I oversee even the redemption recovery,
Mm-hmm.
and and I think while there's a lot of just people in there that realize sanctification is important. I'm always growing, and so this is a good spot to work on vulnerability. There's also a lot of people that are teetering on relapse, or on kind of more severe, at times more severe addictions. And I think um, just trying to stay connected with people who I know need connection even more,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and don't have the normal kind of rhythms of getting together. I think checking in on people that are prone to that isolation, and when they're isolated, have a hard enough time. They have a hard enough time already, but are more prone to kind of falling back into more harmful behaviors. And I think wanting to reach out and connect, with some of those people who I
Mm.
know maybe need it more.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and I think
Are you kind of
uh,
looking at it like almost like triage rules, where you're just kind of prioritizing the people that maybe you wouldn't on a day-to-day thing, they have help, but now that things are kind of isolated, reaching out to the people who might need it most first, and kind of going
yeah,
at it that way.
yeah, or leaders that I know that are doing a great job of they're connected, and they keep a lot of those relationships. And so I maybe in my role it's there's definitely some of those triage, but I find myself connecting with more leaders that are doing this, and just staying connected with them, and making wanting to know how they're doing, connecting with some of those triage people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh so I think there's that, when it's connecting with other people. Personally, I think self-care wise, I know without rhythms of connection with, because I from a self-care standpoint, I know I need rhythms of relationship, because I can't just, from a counseling or pastoral standpoint, like if I'm not like keeping myself in check and getting my own needs met, in terms of like, I'm, just messed up and need to be able to just talk through things and have people in my life. And those don't happen without rhythms,
Yeah.
for me, without having kind of like hey, let's talk to each other this time, this day, and make time for each other, so I think, some of those happened physically for me in the past, because of the rhythms that I have. And I think setting up some of those times and conversations over the phone with people, has been really important for me, to stay connected, to know that I'm continuing to be known, yes, by my wife, but by some core people in my life, that know, that ask me, that care about what's going on in my life, and I keep them updated, and keep that relationship going. I think that's been really important for me. And with God, again, I think the strongest thing for me is actually sitting down. I need to remember, I'm a human being, not a human doing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And and so to sit down to be with him, and to realize the most productive thing I can do right now is to actually be quiet and and put off my to-do list for a minute, to spend time with God. So I think, in addition to trying to, be in his word, you know being with him and spending time in a bit of silent solitude, for me daily, is really important.
Yeah. Cool. That's great, man. So trying to think of what my three are. Or I'm trying to remember what the actual questions are. But I think one thing I'm doing for myself is I've always considered myself a bit of a fake baker. I could throw together a loaf really quick, and it was okay, because homemade bread. But I'm actually trying to bake some loaves of bread every day and get good at
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Wow.
I kind of
But you don't have to go to the store to have an empty aisles of bread. Then you can make
no,
your own.
no, yeah. I stumbled
Wow.
upon a great like a Hokkaido Japanese milk bread recipe, and I've just been tweaking it. So
You're so
yeah,
freaking cool. You know that?
not
Like, you're
cool.
so cool.
Totally weird.
No, you
And
are though, man. All right.
cool from a
Sorry. I'll
distance.
stop interrupting you.
Not cool if you're my wife and you have to put up with it. But and then something I'm trying to do to draw near to God is, because we work at a church, I feel like there's a lot of healthy rhythms that are even just forced on me, even if I'm not in the healthiest place. So I feel like I don't have any of those like kind of softball things. But one thing I realized is I have a what I would consider a pretty healthy prayer life, where I will wake up and really kind of spend time both reading and praying, and then pray with my kids every night, and kind of like these like really great moments of kind of like long form prayer. One thing I'm trying to get better at is just to almost be in conversation with God. There's so much more like these alone moments where I'm talking to myself. I'm like hearing this dumb voice in my head that's just like constantly telling me things I want or things I'm uncomfortable about, or like, and I'm trying to take those moments and just be with God in them. And a lot of that is practicing gratitude, and even in the smallest things. I was thinking this last night, like I was brushing my teeth, and I was like, man, I never thought about how cool it was to be able to just brush my teeth, and I like have clean water and all the things we take for granted.
Sure,
You know what I
sure.
mean? Like, so it's like, I think that's the thing I'm trying to focus on, at least for the time being. That's really drawing me closer, and things I'm trying to do for other people. I'm trying to be really intentional. We live in a little neighborhood kind of up in Sussex County that's far away from everyone, and everybody in the neighborhood knows I work at a church. And that's usually like kind of the starting point of conversation. And a lot of times it just goes to like, oh, what is church service like, or this? And I'm really trying to spend more time not talking about working at a church, but talking about loving Jesus. And I just, I don't know. That's about it. So I don't know if it's if I'm probably going to fail. I mean, I've already failed a number of times in that attempt to be bolder, but I think the more times I pray that I would be willing, then God's just going to put people in my path and force me to kind of wrestle with a little bit of that discomfort and
That usually
anxiety
goes
about
down
it,
when you
So
pray for it. Yeah.
that's cool, man. Hey, so next week, let's talk a little bit about those folks struggling to actually get alone time. Let's talk a little bit about anxiety too. I know that we had talked about maybe touching on that, but we're running out of time, and I think that's probably good for us to maybe just touch base a little bit and touch, kind of go over it, maybe some practical ways people can help their loved ones or themselves work through it. And I think that's about it, man. Would you mind if I just pray for us really quick before we close out?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. God, thank you so much for who you are and how you've made us. And thank you for this opportunity to continue to be with you and do your work. And God, that's just what I'm so thankful for right now, is that we can continue your mission, God, which is to see all souls come to you. And I'm thankful that no matter what happens, pandemics and quarantines and even just everyday life, that mission never changes. So much about our life is always just kind of in a weird imbalance, and the only thing that's true is the hope that we have in you, and the truth that your mission is good and you have it for us. So God, I thank you for that. I thank you for Phil, for his knowledge and his ability to share it, and I thank you that we can just still get to be a church. God, even in the midst of this separation, we can still be gathered here. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Phil, thank you. And we will hang out again soon.
Okay. I'll see you, man.
See you, buddy.